Yeah. Okay. So last week we discussed Kriyat Shema a little bit. We could carry on talking about it. There's always more halachot, but we're going to move on. This week, the Parashat Ekev. So we have the source of the mitzvah of Birkat Hamazon. So it's a good v'achalta v'savato v'rachta. Right. So it's a good opportunity to talk a little bit about Birkat Hamazon, one of maybe the only, or one of only two mitzvot, two brachot that we have, which are the oraita under certain circumstances anyway. Birkat, the other one is Birkat Torah, which according to many opinions is also a Torah obligation, but Birkat Hamazon, as opposed to all the other Birkat Ne'anin and Birkat Mitzvot, etc., which are of rabbinic establishment, Birkat Hamazon, at least parts of it, and under certain circumstances, is a mitzvah d'oraita as well. So, says the Bnei Halacha, Mitzvot Torah she'achal she'ochal adam lechem v'yisba yivarech l'Hashem. After a person has eaten bread and he is satiated, right? That is the mitzvah to say the bracha, as the pasuk says, "Va'achalta v'savata u'berachta et Hashem Elokecha la'aretz hatova asher natan lach." Okay, very familiar pasuk to all of us because we say it every time we bench. Lamdu chachamim shebirkat hamazon tzricha lichlol shlosha inyanim. We learn from this pasuk there are three things that have to be said, three ideas, three concepts which have to be included in Birkat Hamazon. From the fact that it says Uverachta et Hashem Elokecha, we learn that we have to say the bracha of Hazan. In other words, that we thank Hashem for the food. Right? We give thanks for the food itself. Right? You might have thought that Birkat Hamazon, the bracha that you say after eating food, only has to do with food. Right? But that's only one of three brachot midoraita plus a fourth bracha d'Rabbanan we'll get to. Right? Birkat Hamazon is comprised of 4 brachot, but the 3 yanim from the Torah. So from the fact that it says Uverachta, we learn the bracha of Hazan, which is related to the food itself. We then learn from the fact that it says Al ha'aretz atova, right, that we have to give thanks for the land as well. Lamdu shetzarich levarech ulodot al ha'aretz, give thanks for Eretz Yisrael. Umikach she'asifat Torah lomar, it does not just say, this relates a little bit to what we spoke about on Shabbos, but it does not just say al ha'aretz, but it says ha'aretz hatova. So we learn from there shetzarich levarech al hatov ha'muvchar sheba'aretz, on the greatest, the most choicest part of the land of Eretz Yisrael, which is of course Yerushalayim. So those are the 3 brachot that we say. HaMitzvah me'aTorah she'mevarech yazkir inyanim elu b'kol nusach shirtzeh lefi da'ato v'yocholet bituyo. Okay, so we find by a number of examples, a number of mitzvot, the mitzvah from the Torah, so long as one has mentioned these 3 things, however you say it, in whatever language, whatever words one chooses, one would have fulfilled the mitzvah on a doraita level. ובאו משה, יהושע, דוד ושלמה, ותקנו נוסח מובחר ומושלם לפי הטובה שנוספה בימיהם. As is with much of our prayers, later on, the sages came, right, Moshe Rabbeinu, Yeshua, David and Shlomo, and they established the specific words, the specific formula of the brachot which we need to say. And all of this was based on certain things that happened historically in their days. So, b'shah she'arad aman liYisrael tiken Moshe Rabbeinu et nusach Birkat Hazan. Right, when the man fell in the Midbar, Moshe Rabbeinu established the bracha of Hazan. Right? Often, I think we've spoken about here before once, what was the bracha that Bnei Israel said before they ate the man? Right? So there are at least 6 different opinions of that, probably more. The most famous one, I think, is that they said Hamotzi lechem min hashamayim. Right? There is such an opinion, but we know what they said, what bracha they said afterwards, because that is the bracha of Hazan, which Moshe Rabbeinu established. At that point, we still do not have a fixed nusach for the bracha of haaretz and hatovah, and that was established when Bnei Israel entered Eretz Yisrael. Yoshua bin Nun composed the second bracha of haaretz, right? And later on, כשקבע דוד המלך את ירושלים לעיר הקודש והמלכות, when David HaMelech established Yerushalayim as his capital, as the city of Ir HaKodesh, right? So then he established the bracha of Ali Saramecha v'Ali Yerushalayim Milecha, and then when the Beit HaMikdash was built later on, so then his son Shlomo added on Al Bayit HaGadol VeHaKadosh. That is those are the brachot which we say. שבית המקדש היה בנוי, היו מבקשים מהשם שימשיך את קיומו. When the Beit HaMikdash still stood in the 3rd bracha where we mentioned, right, the Beit HaMikdash, so the bracha at that point was, the tefillah was that it should continue to stand. Nowadays, of course, it is not yet rebuilt. So לאחר שנחרב, תקנו נוסח שבו אנו מבקשים מהשם שירחם עלינו. The nusach, that nusach was changed once it was destroyed, that not that it should be rebuilt, that Hashem should have mercy on us and rebuild Yerushalayim and return the kingship of David to its place and rebuild the Beit HaMikdash. Amul Chachamim, shechovah laskir b'berkat ha'aretz et shivcha shel ha'aretz. Right, so it's not just that you mention Eretz Yisrael, but you have to mention the praise of Eretz Yisrael. It's not just like, oh, this land again, right? You have to, like we spoke at Shabbat, it has to be Eretz HaTovah. She Eretz Chemda Tova Al Chava. That's the way we say it. Not only that, and interestingly, again, when we say these words so often, we don't necessarily always stop to think about them. But if we were to ask, what would you expect? Right, Birkat HaMazon. So already it's surprising. You're giving thanks for the food, right? Whether you're sitting in Poland or in Russia or in North Africa or in South Africa or wherever across the world, but every time you eat, you're remembering Eretz Yisrael, you're remembering Yerushalayim, right? You're giving thanks for the land. So not only do we mention, very interestingly, in the second bracha, not only do we mention Haaretz, but we have to mention as well Brit Milah v'et Torah, mipnei she'al yedei shtei mitzvot halalu ani yoshim et haaretz. Because we are taught that it's through these two mitzvot that we are able to inherit and to merit the land. As it was said, the original Brit, right, Ben Abtarim, it was said to Avram Avinu, when he was commanded about Brit Milah, the Pasuk says, Hakimoti et briti beini uveinecha, uvein zaracha achalecha ledorotam, livrit olam. I've established my Brit with you and with your descendants forever, right? Liot lecha leelokim, ulezaracha achalecha, ונתתי לך ולזרעך אחריך את ארץ מגוריך את כל ארץ כנען אחוזת עולם והייתי להם לאלוקים. So the idea of the Brit is connected to the Brit that's giving over the land, and that's connected to the Brit Milah as well. וכן למדנו שבזכות התורה והמצוות אני יושיב את הארץ. We learn that in the merit of Torah and mitzvot, that is how we strengthen and gain our hold on this land. שנאמר בתחילת הפרשה שבה נצטווינו על ברכת המזון, right, the psukim which we'll read the Shabbat. When we get to Birkat HaMazon, before that we're taught, כל המצווה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום, תשמור לעשות למען תחיון, ולביתם ובאתם וירשתם את הארץ. You'll keep all these mitzvot in order that you will live, in order that you will inherit this land as well, etc. So therefore he says, עוד אמרו חכמים, שצריך להקדים את הזכרת הברית להזכרת התורה. We have to mention the Brit first, before we mention Torah. מפני שבקשר לברית המילה, נזכרו י' ג' בריתות, אפילו התורה נכתבו רק 3 בריתות. Okay, we won't get into that now. בברית המילה באה לידי, בסדר. So, בברכה השלישית, תקנו להזכיר את מלכות בית דוד, מפני שעל ידי דוד נתקדשה ירושלים. In the third bracha, when we mention Yerushalayim, we mention מלכות בית David as well, because it was through the kingship of David that Yerushalayim became what it is, עיר הקודש, עיקר ישועה של הארץ, וירושלים תלוי במלכות Yisrael. Okay, so those are the first 3 brachot. So as we've said, from the Torah we learn from the Pasuk, the different parts of the Pasuk that we have to mention Hazan, we have to mention the food, we have to mention Haaretz, so we have to mention Yerushalayim. Originally, that could have been said in whatever words one wanted to. Moshe Rabbeinu established the first bracha, Yeshua the second, and David and Shlomo the third. So we have 3 brachot that we say, which are Doraita. Again, the mitzvah Doraita is only when one is Achalta v'savata, if you're satiated. If you ate a small amount, and even if you're still hungry, but that's all you have to eat, so you would still have a mitzvah d'Rabbanan to say Birkat HaMazon, even on a kazai. The Gemara has a very, very interesting drush about that, which maybe we'll talk about another night. But those are the first 3 brachot. But then we have a 4th bracha, and actually there's a number of nafkaminot, and we'll see in the way that Chazal wanted to make a separation between the first 3 brachot and the 4th one to show the distinction that the first 3 are Doraita and the 4th one is the Rabbanan. Okay, what is the 4th bracha and why do we have it? The extra sections afterwards, all the Rachamans, etc., that we say afterwards as part of Birkat HaMazon, that's just an addition that is that's not included in any of the brachot, so to speak. So לאחר חורבן בית המקדש וחורבן הארץ, היה נראה לכאורה שאין עוד תקווה לבניין הארץ וירושלים. Says Rav Melamed, after the Churban, it seemed like there was no hope left. ואין אותם להמשיך לברך את השם על הארץ הטובה. And the question was, how could we continue to say על הארץ הטובה when everything was lost, everything was destroyed? לפיכך הוסיפו ותקנו את ברכת הטוב והמיטיב. This is the background to the addition of the bracha הטוב והמיטיב, כדי לחזק את האמונה שהכל לטובה, in order to strengthen our faith. ואף החורבן, הגלות והאיסורים נועדו לתקן אותו, להביאנו מחדש לבניין שלם יותר של הארץ. In other words, even through the destruction, even through the galut, and even through all the exiles, we continue to say, Haaretz HaTovah, we continue to say, HaTova Meitiv, and that helps us to remember and to understand that the story is not over and we're coming back and there will be an even greater redemption at the end. But the specific event that this bracha relates to is the following. ביום מיוחד תקנו חכמים שביבנה את הברכה, ביום שבו ניתנו הרגי ביתר לקבורה. ביתר הייתה עיר גדולה ביהודה, so there was a great city called Beitar, and that was the capital really of Bar Kokhba. This was the center of the Bar Kokhba rebellion against the Romans. The city was destroyed. It was a terrible tragedy, and many of the fighters were killed. And it was only for a long time they were not able to be buried. And when those bodies were brought for burial, that was when Chazal came and established this bracha of Hatov v'Hameitiv. Right? It seems counterintuitive, talking about Hatov v'Hameitiv, of something so terrible, but even in there, to see the good that was, it says Hatov shelo isrichu v'Hameitiv shnitnu lekvura. They established that Hatov, over the fact that the bodies did not decompose, v'Hameitiv, that they were able to be brought to Jewish burial as well. ומזה שנינו לקבורה ישנו רמז להבטחה כי עוד יקומו לגורלם לקץ ימים וזה סימן לקיום כל הבטחות הנביאים לתחייה וגאולה. So there's a certain hint and there's a certain comfort in the fact that they were brought to burial, that was not the end, that there will be the continuation, there'll be Tchiat HaMeitim, there'll be the fulfillment of all the prophecies and things will be good. We'll be able to say Haaretz HaTovah and give thanks over Yerushalayim and Beit HaMikdash and Malchut Beit David and all those things which will ultimately be restored. What does all of that have to do with the food that we've just eaten? But that's the point. These things are so central to our faith and so central to what it is to be a Jew. Even every time we eat food. This is part of the bracha as well. Rabbi Chananya ben Akash